A grieving single father saves a child, unknowingly setting off a chain of quiet miracles. Through letters and lost love, he finds healing and a second chance at the family he thought he lost. Let's start. The clock didn't chime, but the silence told him it was morning. In the soft indigo hour before dawn, Daniel's eyes opened not with urgency, but with routine, the kind of wakefulness that came not from rest, but from obligation. Outside, a heavy gray sky pressed down over the town, the kind that blanketed rooftops in silence and turned every sound into something hushed and hollow. It had snowed again in the night, and now the world outside his small, rented home on the edge of a tired neighborhood looked like it had been erased and redrawn in graphite and chalk. He lay still for a moment in bed, one arm stretched across the empty half of the mattress. The sheets there were always colder. A quiet cough from the other room stirred him. Small, innocent, familiar. "Dad," came the sleepy voice barely above a whisper. "I'm up, buddy." The house was small. 2 rooms, creaky floors, baseboard heaters that ticked like old clocks. But it was theirs. It was warm enough. The coffee machine clicked on automatically, its gurgling sound the only luxury he allowed himself each morning. Daniel moved to the kitchen like a man underwater, his limbs slow, movements practiced. He made his son's lunch, peanut butter, no crust, and packed it with the precision of a ritual. The boy, still wrapped in his dinosaur pajamas, padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "You have a dream?" Daniel asked, ruffling his son's dark hair. The boy nodded. "You were flying." Daniel smiled, soft and brief, pouring milk into a chipped ceramic mug with cartoon cars on it. That'd be something. He dropped the boy off at school just after 8. The snow had turned to sleet by then, pelting the windshield of his rusted-out sedan. He watched his son's small figure disappear through the double doors, then sat a moment longer in the driver's seat, hands still on the wheel. The silence in the car felt heavy. Not sad, just full. At the garage, the day unfolded as most did. Slow, with machines that coughed and spat and men who cursed under their breath. Daniel worked with callous hands and the patience of someone who didn't mind being unseen. He preferred it that way. The younger guys at the shop were louder, faster, more eager to get to weekend. But Daniel moved through the day like a prayer, measured, deliberate, worn smooth by repetition. Oil, grease, the coal by steel, the whine of air tools. The occasional crackle of the radio playing old rock songs that reminded him of someone else's youth. The boss didn't like him much, not because he wasn't good, but because he was quiet. That kind of quiet, unsettled man who needed noise to feel important. "You got those brake lines done yet?" the boss barked. Daniel didn't look up. "Just finishing." The man snorted, not a minute too fast. By 4 his back ached. His hands were black under the nails, his breath visible in the drafty shop. He changed out of his coveralls and drove home in silence. No music, just the hush of tires over slush. His son greeted him at the door with a drawing. Scribbled lines that Daniel recognized as their house, the 2 of them standing in front of it, a son in the corner, a dog they didn't have. "You drew this for me?" The boy nodded. Daniel crouched, placed a grease-stained hand gently on his son's shoulder. "It's perfect." They ate dinner together at the small kitchen table. Leftover pasta. The boy talked about school. Mrs. Lindstrom said the class might get a guinea pig. He asked if they could get one too. Daniel said they'd think about it. They always said that. "We'll think about it. Later." After bedtime stories and a long hug that neither of them let go of quickly, Daniel tucked the boy in and kissed his forehead. "I miss Mommy," the boy said, his voice muffled by the blanket. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed. "Me too." A pause. "Does she miss us?" Daniel's throat tightened. "I think she misses us a lot." The boy nodded, eyes already drifting closed. "I drew her in the picture too. She's the son." Daniel sat there long after the boy fell asleep, fingers idly tracing the edge of the comforter. Snow was falling again outside, fine and now like ash. The house was quiet, except for the tick of the heater and the soft, steady breath of a child who didn't yet understand grief but felt its shape. He poured himself a drink, just one, sat on the old armchair by the window. The cold crept in through the pane, and Daniel wrapped a worn quilt around his shoulders, one his wife had picked out years ago on some weekend drive when they still took weekend drives. It smelled faintly of lavender and old firewood, and like that, the past arrived, not in loud recollection, but in pieces. Her laugh when she teased him for always double-knotting his boots. The way she used to sing to the radio in the kitchen, off-key and unbothered. How she made French toast on Sundays with cinnamon she'd insist was just the right kind. The fight hadn't been loud. That's what made it worse. It had been a slow crack between them. A difference in what mattered. Work hours, missed dinners, his tired silence mistaken for indifference. Her frustration worn into walls like nail marks. Then, the day she packed a small bag and said she needed space. He didn't chase her. He thought she'd come back when the silence hurt more than the shouting. She didn't. Not right away. Weeks passed, then a month, then one morning, she called. Her voice was soft. Careful. I was going to come back, she'd said. He remembered standing in the garage, phone in one hand, wrench in the other, a car hoisted up like a body under surgery. So come back, he'd said. Silence. I can't. Why not? But she didn't answer the question, just whispered, take care of him, please. He'd asked 100 questions after that. None were answered. Then came the envelope in the mail a few weeks later. Legal documents. Custody transfer. No note. She was gone a week later. Just gone. He didn't know about the letters until the hospice nurse found them. Handwritten. Unsent. A stack of them bound in ribbon. Her name on the top in small cursive. To Daniel. For when I'm not there. He hadn't read them all at once. Couldn't. One night he opened the first. Then another 2 weeks later. Each one carried her voice in ink. Memories of their boy's first word. The day he was born. Little nothings about the way she saw Daniel when he didn't think she was looking. They weren't sad. Not exactly. Just full of the love she hadn't known how to speak out loud until she was too far from it. That night, sitting with the snow thick outside and the fireplace glowing low, Daniel pulled another letter from the drawer by the armchair. The envelope was soft from handling. He turned it over slowly, opened it. Daniel, I saw you through the window the other day. You were fixing the porch light. You looked so tired. I wish I'd opened the door and told you then how proud I am of you, how much I still love you, how hard it is not to say it. But I was scared of dying, of hurting you more, of our son seeing me that way. I'm not strong like you, but I want you to be happy. I want you to keep making French toast on Sundays and let him believe the sun is always up there, even when it's not. Promise me, if nothing else, you'll let someone love you again. And don't be too proud to accept help. The world can be kind. Let it be kind to you. Always. Mira. Daniel pressed the paper to his chest and closed his eyes. The fireplace crackled gently. Outside, the wind had died and the snow fell like feathers. Tomorrow would come again, early, cold, and sharp-edged. But tonight, for a moment, the grief felt warm. He looked toward the hallway where his son slept, then out the window into the white. Somewhere behind that snow, the stars still shone. It began on a morning so still, the world seemed to hold its breath. The snow had finally stopped, leaving the town hushed and fragile, as if even sound might crack the ice that glazed the streets. Daniel stood by the window, cradling a mug of coffee gone cold, watching his son chase breath into frost on the glass. Can we walk today? The boy asked without turning. Daniel considered. The car was buried under 2 days' worth of snow, the road still slicked with unspoken danger. But it was Saturday. No school, no rush, just the slow turning of time. Bundle up, he said quietly. It's cold out there. The boy grinned, disappearing down the hallway, the sound of small boots and jacket zippers echoing like joy in a house too used to silence. They walked through town just after 10, the morning sun soft and wide across the rooftops. Their boots crunched against the sidewalk's thin blanket of snow, and breath made little ghosts in the air. The boy held Daniel's hand with the trust of someone who didn't know the world could break. The town was still waking, shutters half drawn, storefronts flickering to life, an old man sweeping salt on the steps of the bakery. They pass a street musician playing a violin, strings trembling against the cold. Daniel paused, dropped a few coins into the case, and nodded his thanks. Music in winter always sounded like memory. At the intersection by Maple and 4th, they waited at the light, the kind of long red that made you aware of your breathing. Daniel let his son press the crosswalk button, just because he liked the click it made. And then, a scream. Not loud, not theatrical, just sharp and pure, ripped from a woman's throat the way names are shouted when they're almost gone. Daniel turned instinctively. A little girl, maybe 4 or 5, darted into the street. A bright red mitten had slipped from her hand and was caught by the wind, tumbling like a leaf. She chased it, the sound of tires, rubber sliding on ice. A car too fast, too late. Daniel didn't think. He ran. Time didn't slow, it thickened, became molasses in glass. He reached her with only a breath to spare, arms sweeping her up just as the car swerved, skidding hard and kissing the snowbank with shuddering crash. The silence after was not peace. It was shock, raw and electric. Daniel held the girl tight against his chest, her tiny hands clutching his coat, face buried in the crook of his neck. She was sobbing. He realized he was too. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly, voice trembling. She shook her head. The mother arrived moments later, breathless and breaking, falling to her knees beside them. "Lena! Oh, God, Lena, are you okay?" The girl reached for her, and Daniel handed her over gently, as if passing something sacred. The woman clutched her daughter, crying, whispering thanks, over and over. She looked up at Daniel, eyes wide, desperate, brimming. You saved her." Daniel shook his head, almost reflexively. She just needed someone to be fast. He stood slowly, knees aching, chest heaving, the cold finally catching up to him. The driver of the car was out now, pale and shaking, apologizing, explaining the brakes, the ice, the helplessness. People were gathering. Phones were recording. Someone said, "He pulled her out right in front of it." A police car arrived, then an ambulance, though no one was hurt, just stunned, still breathing. The mother hugged Daniel. It wasn't brief. It wasn't for show. It was a kind of embrace that said, "You have touched my life forever." Her tears soaked into his coat, but he didn't pull away. She pressed a crumpled thank you into his hand, words too small to carry what she felt. Then she was gone, taking the little girl home. The crowd began to disperse. Snow started falling again, thin and uncommitted. Daniel turned to find his son, watching from the sidewalk, wide-eyed and silent. "Dad," the boy whispered, "you flew?" Daniel walked to him slowly and knelt, pressing his forehead to his son's. "No, buddy, I just ran." "But you saved her." He nodded. "Yeah, I guess I did." They walked home together, slower this time. The boy never let go of his hand. By evening, the video had made its way online. A grainy clip from a bystander's phone, shaky but clear. A man sprinting into traffic, arms out, a child scooped from the brink. Headlines used words like hero and miracle. Daniel didn't read them. He fed his son dinner, grilled cheese, cut diagonal like Mary used to, and tucked him in early. Then he sat on the porch long after the boy had drifted off, snow falling in soft spirals around him. The thank you note from the woman sat folded in his coat pocket. He hadn't opened it yet. Some things needed time. On Monday, the shop was colder than usual. Daniel clocked in quietly. The others greeted him with nods, a few handshakes. One of the younger guys clapped him on the back. "Didn't know you had it in you, man." The boss didn't say much, just stared a little too long before turning away. By Thursday, Daniel was called into the office. The conversation was clipped, vague. "You've been distracted. I saved a child's life." "I know, and that's admirable, but we've got rules. Liability, schedule. You left without finishing a job." "I left to stop a little girl from dying." A pause. "This isn't personal, Daniel. We just need someone more consistent." So he packed his things. A wrench set, a rag with his name on it, a photo of his boy tucked behind an old calendar. He walked out into the wind, jobless, heartbeat thudding like a clock too fast. That night, he didn't tell his son. Instead, they sat by the fire. The boy played with his drawing set. Daniel read him a story about a knight who didn't want to fight, but did anyway to protect the weak. When his son fell asleep, Daniel opened the thank you note. I don't know your name, but you gave mine back to me. Lena is alive because of you. I don't have anything that can match what you've given, but please, if you ever need anything at all, this is my number. My name is Evelyn. I'll never forget what you did. He folded it carefully, placed it between the pages of a book Mira used to read aloud. The next week passed slow and quiet. Daniel applied for jobs, fixed small things around the house, tried not to let the weight of it all press too hard against his ribs. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. A real letter. Ink envelope. A woman's name in small cursive. Catherine Mallory. It was unexpected. Simple. Grateful. Mr. Daniel, I saw what you did on the news. It moved me deeply. Not just the act, but the way you looked afterward, like you'd rather not be seen at all. I understand that look. I lost my son 2 years ago. He was 6. A car. A moment. That's all it took. Thank you for being the person who acted. Thank you for reminding me there are still people in this world who don't think twice about saving someone else. I hope this note finds you well. I don't expect anything in return. Just wanted to say you matter. Catherine. Daniel read the letter twice. Then again, he set it down beside Myra's. That night, he wrote back, Dear Catherine, thank you for your kind words. I'm sorry about your son. I can't imagine that kind of pain, though I know some version of it. I didn't do anything special. Just move when I had to. But I'm glad she's okay. That's all that matters. Take care. Daniel. He mailed it the next day. She replied a week later. And so it began a quiet exchange, a kind of healing pass back and forth in envelopes. No talk of big things, just moments. A bird on the porch, a song that reminded them of someone, the weather in town's too far to touch. And in between the letters, Daniel found a kind of breath again. He took his son sledding. They made pancakes for dinner. They laughed more. Not always, but enough. Then one day, Catherine's letter ended with a question. Would you and your son like to meet for coffee sometime? I'd like to thank you in person. Daniel stared at the page for a long while. Then, in the soft quiet of the evening, he picked up a pen. The first time they met in person, it was raining, not a thunderstorm, just the kind of rain that whispered across rooftops, threaded through branches, and kissed the skin without asking. Daniel stood outside the cafe, his hand resting on his son's shoulder, watching the blurred shape of his own reflection in the glass. Inside, Catherine sat by the window. She wore a pale gray coat, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug, steam fogging the glass. Her hair was pinned up loosely, a few strands curling with the damp. She looked out but not directly at him, as though she was watching the rain, not waiting. Daniel opened the door slowly. The bell above it chimed like wind through an old chapel. His son tugged gently at his sleeve. Is that her? Daniel nodded. Catherine stood when she saw them, her smile soft but unsure, like someone stepping onto ice that might hold. Daniel introduced his son. This is Micah. And she knelt to greet the boy at eye level, her voice no louder than a lullaby. You're taller than I imagined, she said, smiling at him. Micah grinned, hiding behind Daniel's coat just long enough to be charming, then slid into the booth across from her. They ordered cocoa and coffee, talked about nothing for a while. Rain, school, favorite cartoons. Catherine didn't speak of her son that first day, and Daniel didn't mention Mira. But there was a silence between them that felt lived in, not awkward, like two people sitting beside the same grief and choosing not to wake it. The second time they met, it was sunny, cold but clear. They took Micah to the park. He played with fallen leaves, inventing games with sticks and stones, laughter ringing like bells in the distance. Catherine and Daniel walked slowly, the kind of pace people use when there's more to say than breath to say it with. You wrote something once, Catherine said, about not doing anything special, just moving when you had to. Daniel nodded. I used to think grief made people selfish, but it doesn't. It just makes everything quieter. He died 2 years ago next month. Daniel didn't speak. She went on. I didn't leave the house for weeks. My husband and I, well, we were already cracking before it happened. After, it just broke. A crow passed overhead, its wings casting shadows like hands on the grass. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Me too. They stopped by a bench. Daniel sat, elbows on knees, watching Micah run. I miss her every day, he said finally, even when I'm angry, even when I'm okay. I still set a place for her in my thoughts. Some mornings I look over, and for just a second, I think she'll be there, and then I remember. Catherine nodded. That second hurts the most. He looked at her, and for the first time, saw not just sadness, but someone still trying, still reaching out across the ache. They met again, and again. They didn't call them dates, not at first. Just walks, cafes, quiet afternoons in the bookstore, where Micah liked to sit in the children's corner and read to stuffed animals. Sometimes Daniel would bring a letter he'd written but hadn't mailed. Sometimes Catherine brought an old toy of her son's for Micah to borrow. Rituals grew between them, slowly, like ivy on a wall too long untouched. One afternoon, Catherine invited them to her house. It was bigger than Daniel expected. Tall windows, vaulted ceilings, the kind of quiet that echoed, but warm, lived in. Micah found piano in the corner and tapped at the keys with reverence. That was James's, Catherine said softly. He used to play lullabies by ear. We never taught him. He just figured them out. Micah pressed a soft chord. Catherine smiled. He would have liked you, she said. Daniel looked around the room. There were no pictures on the mantel. Just a single small box with a carved lid. He didn't ask. Instead, he helped her make tea. Micah fell asleep on the couch, a blanket tucked under his chin. That night, Daniel stayed late. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. They just sat beside each other on the steps, watching stars blink into the dark. I don't know what this is, she said, but I don't want it to stop. Me neither. It wasn't sudden. Nothing between them was. Love came in a way he packed Micah's snack, just the way Catherine had taught him, in the way she remembered which jacket he liked in the winter, in the way they spoke each other's silences fluently. One morning, Daniel brought an old toolbox to her house, not because anything was broken, just because fixing things was how he showed care. He repaired a squeaky door, realigned a crooked cabinet, tightened a loose banister. Catherine watched him work from the kitchen, her heart folding around the quiet competence of his hands. You remind me of him, she said one evening, when Mike had fallen asleep during movie night. Your son. She nodded. And you remind me who I was when he was alive. That woman who still believed in second chances. Daniel placed her son's toy, now permanently adopted by Micah, on the table gently, like it was sacred. I think she's still in there, he said. Maybe she is. Later, he tucked a note into the pages of her favorite poetry book. For all the broken things you keep holding together, you are stronger than you know. She found it the next morning, pressed it to her heart, and wept in silence. Spring came quietly. Snow melted from the rooftops. Micah grew taller. Daniel got a new job, smaller shop, better hours. Catherine began consulting again, just a little, finding her way back into the world one step at a time. They took weekend drives now. Fields blooming beside them, windows down, old songs filling the air. Sometimes they spoke of the past. Sometimes they didn't. On what would have been Myra's birthday, Catherine surprised Daniel with a small framed photo of her, one she found online, carefully restored. She's beautiful, she said, placing it on his bookshelf. He didn't speak, just pulled her into an embrace that spoke volumes. And on what would have been James's birthday, Daniel brought her a box of wind-up toys, tiny clockwork birds and animals. He liked these, didn't he? She smiled through tears. He did. Micah called Catherine Kate now, sometimes Aunt Kate. Daniel never corrected him. And one day, she slipped and said, our boy, and they let it pass like a breeze through open curtains. One evening, Daniel sat on the porch with Micah, watching the fireflies blink between trees. Do you like her? Micah asked. Daniel smiled. I do. Do you love her? He was quiet for a long moment. I think I'm learning to. Micah nodded. I like when she reads to me. Me too. That night, Catherine stayed over. Not because of anything grand or final, just because the house was warm and her heart felt safe. Daniel handed her a small envelope before bed. Inside was a letter. Dear Catherine, I never believed I'd get a second chance. I thought love was something you only got once. But maybe it's not about getting something back. Maybe it's about finding someone who sees the same cracks in the world and choosing to build again anyway. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it. Yours, Daniel. She didn't speak for a long time after reading it. Then she kissed his forehead, pressed her hands to his face, and whispered, Me too. Outside, the wind carried petals through the dark, and somewhere in the night, the world began again. The morning of the decision, the world was impossibly still. Mist clung to the edges of the field behind the house, hanging like a breath not yet released. Birds stirred in branches, quiet and waiting. And inside, in the soft half-light of dawn, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. The same table where Mira once folded letters she never sent. The same spot where Micah, years ago, had his first real laugh after her funeral. Catherine was upstairs, reading quietly. Micah's socks pattered across the hallway overhead. Daniel didn't move. He just watched the steam fade and listened to the house breathe. He hadn't planned to bring it up. Not yet, but sometimes the quiet says what words can't. Downstairs, the house had begun to fill with the scent of fresh toast and the soft tick of the old wall clock. One Catherine had found in a thrift shop and insisted on fixing. That had been one of their first projects together. A small, shared act of reclaiming time. I've been thinking, Daniel said, voice low, not to anyone in particular. Later, over breakfast, he looked at Catherine, her eyes catching his like morning light through stained glass. I was offered something, he said. Something new. She didn't answer. Not yet. A guy I used to know. Owns a little place by the coast. Body shop, but quiet. He's getting old. Wants to pass it on. Asked if I'd be interested. Catherine set down her cup slowly. And are you? I might be, he said. It'd be a different life. Slower. Maybe better for Micah. The school's small. There's room to grow. She watched him for a long moment. I didn't think I'd want to start over again, she said. But I do. Not because I'm trying to forget. Because I finally want to remember without pain. Micah looked between them. Are we moving? Daniel reached out, brushing a crumb from the boy's cheek. Would you be okay with that, buddy? Micah shrugged. As long as you and Aunt Kate come too. It wasn't a decision. It was surrender. To hope, to what could be. The weeks that followed were full of boxes, laughter, and long nights sorting through memories. Catherine packed slowly, carefully. Every photo, every book, every forgotten toy tucked with care and a whisper. One night, Daniel found her in the old nursery she never repainted. She stood by the window, holding a worn sweater to her chest. It still smells like him, she said. Daniel stepped beside her. He didn't say anything, just wrapped his arm around her and let her cry. They didn't erase the past. They folded it gently into the future. The move itself was simple. A truck, a map, a list scrawled in Daniel's neat but faded handwriting. They stopped halfway through the drive to watch a thunderstorm roll over the hills, lightning slicing the sky into gold-veined fragments. Micah fell asleep in the back seat, cradling the wind-up toy Daniel had repaired months ago. Their new home sat on a hill just outside a small coastal town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and strangers were just friends waiting for a story. The house wasn't perfect. Paint peeled in corners. The fence leaned like an old man dozing in the sun. But there was a porch, a garden, and enough room for old memories and new dreams. Catherine started writing again. Not business letters or plans. Just thoughts. Small poems. Notes to herself. She pinned them to the fridge, to mirrors, tucked them into Daniel's pockets like folded prayers. Micah started school and made friends faster than Daniel had dared hope. He brought home drawings of stars and oceans and people holding hands. This one's you and Kate, he'd say. And me in the middle. Daniel opened the new shop a week after they arrived. The sign still smelled of fresh wood. Clients trickled in slowly, more curious than anything. But word spread. People trusted someone who fixed things with care, who listened more than he talked. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and watched the horizon melt into dusk. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't. Catherine would hum an old lullaby. Micah would doze beside them. Once, Daniel reached into his coat pocket and found a letter, folded tight. It was Catherine's handwriting. I thought I lost a part of me that could love again. But you found it, not by asking, but by waiting. You didn't pull me from the dark. You just lit a lantern and waited until I was ready to walk toward it. I love you, Daniel. Thank you for letting me try again. He looked at her, eyes shining in the lamplight, said nothing, just reached for her hand. They got married on a quiet September day. No tuxedos, no crowd, just Micah holding a bouquet too big for his hands and a handful of neighbors who cried even though they didn't know the whole story. Catherine wore a soft blue dress. Daniel wore a tie Micah picked out from a thrift store. The wind carried the vows across the sea like a blessing. I don't promise perfection, Catherine said. I just promise presence and love and kindness when we fall short. I promise to keep building with you, Daniel said, even if all we have are broken pieces. Micah stood between them, holding their hands. Can I say something too? The officiant smiled. Of course. I think Mom would be happy, he said quietly. And I think James would be too. No one spoke for a moment, but hearts cracked open like sun through storm clouds. They moved through seasons like pages of an old book, dog-eared and read often. There were hard days. Catherine had moments where grief came back like an old friend needing shelter. Daniel had mornings where Myra's absence felt fresh as frost. But they held each other through it. Every birthday was a ritual. Myra's photo sat by the window with a candle. James's sweater stayed in the closet, always clean, always ready. They didn't forget. They honored. Micah grew into his laughter, into his questions. He asked once if he could call Catherine Mom. She cried, then nodded. If it feels right, sweetheart, then yes. One spring, Catherine opened a small community center, a place for kids to read, paint, heal. She called it the Lantern Room. Daniel built the shelves. Micah picked out the colors. On the wall near the entrance was a frame. Inside was Daniel's letter, the one she'd carried for months. Maybe it's not about getting something back. Maybe it's about finding someone who sees the same cracks in the world and choosing to build again anyway. The world didn't become perfect, but it became whole. Whole in the way hearts do when stitched with care, when love is patient, when second chances aren't loud but steady. One evening, much later, Daniel sat with Micah, watching the tide come in. Do you miss her still? Micah asked. Every day, Daniel said. Me too. They were quiet a while. But I'm glad we have this life now, Micah said. I like our story. Daniel smiled. So do I. Behind them, Catherine lit the porch light, and the soft glow spilled across the yard like hope unfolding. And the sea, endless and soft, whispered back. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. We would love to have your feedback in the comment section.